So welcome to another edition of the Common Constitutionalist Weekly Podcast, and I am Brent, the Common Constitutionalist, and I'm on the side of the road here, and I wanted to discuss something regarding the Revolutionary War. Now, I've been living in New England for quite a long time. I'm not overall a huge fan of New England, but I must say that it's a relatively safe area. So this is the road I'll be speaking about in a minute. It's a little noisy, a lot of traffic, but in any event, at least we don't get earthquakes and hurricanes, tsunamis and floods and all sorts of crap. So it's a relatively safe place. It wasn't always that way, obviously, due to the revolution. And since I like history and I like revolutionary history, New England is obviously the place to be for revolutionary history. A lot went on up here, as you might think, or as you might know. So practically everybody knows of the Boston Tea Party. It occurred in 1773, and it's kind of the recognized unofficial kickoff of the Revolutionary War, for want of a better term. Well, there's an event in New Hampshire that predates it by almost 2 years, by about 20 months. It predates it, and we're going to discuss that. And the reason why I'm stopped on the side of the road and having to fight the noise of traffic is that this, as you can see behind me, is a road called Mast Road, and it runs from Manchester up through northern New Hampshire. And it's called Mast Road. And the reason why it's called Mast Road is that the King of England, before and during the revolutionary times, he would have masts made for his warships in New Hampshire. They were traveled down this road, Mast Road, and taken to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, put on a ship, and taken over to England, or they were crafted, his warships were crafted in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. So that's what we're going to discuss today on the Common Constitutionalist. What happened to actually kick off the Revolutionary War today?
Listening?
No, you limey. They're not listening. They're watching.
The Common Constitutionalist, broadcasting from an undisclosed location, free from the prying eyes of establishment black helicopters.
So this is the next stop on our journey of Mast Road. That's Mast Road right up there. And once again, like I said, this was the King's Road, where all the masts made of New Hampshire white pine was transported from Ware, New Hampshire, all the way down to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, or to a river, Merrimack or Piscataquag River, and was floated down and basically either taken to New England. Sorry about that, but this is what you get. This ain't, it ain't revolutionary times where you have occasional horse go by. You got a lot of traffic on this road now. But at any rate, 380 years ago, this road, like I said, was really important because it's actually started in 1634 when the king at that time, I think it was King William or something like that. At any rate, the reason why the British coveted New Hampshire white pine so much is that, first off, by the time they got around to exploiting the natural resources of the colonies, they had already spent or had already depleted the stocks, deforestation basically of Great Britain. So they had deforested Great Britain, all the good pine stock, the straight and wonderful mast, high-masted pine trees and whatnot in Great Britain. So they had to find a new source. And it doesn't just grow on trees. Get it? At any rate, so this is what Mast Road was all about. And now, one of the reasons why New Hampshire was chosen, because the New Hampshire white pine although it's lighter than the European pine, it contained more resin. It was straighter, taller, and it contained more resin. So the mast and the boards that they would make out of these things for the ships would last a lot longer. A American-made, from American wood, produced English warship would last a couple of decades or more, which was awesome. So you got that going for you. And it also took an incredible amount of wood to make these English warships. Each warship took 6,000 trees to produce a single warship. And in today's dollars, a single warship, a single English crown warship, would cost the equivalent in today's dollars of a modern aircraft carrier. Every single one of his warships, the King's warships of England, cost as much as a modern day aircraft carrier. That is something incredible. But the colonists need lumber too. And so, I mean, they needed it for their homes, their barns, their settlements, for expansion and whatnot of the colonies. But unfortunately, most of the lumber was off limits. In, I think it was, where was it? In 1690, King William prohibited the cutting of white pine over 2 feet in diameter, all right? And then in 1722, under the reign of George I, the Parliament passed a new law that reduced the diameter down to 1 foot. So anything beyond a 12-inch diameter piece of white pine couldn't be cut down for use by the colonists. It was reserved by the king and the Parliament. And you were fined, and there were all sorts of things that they could do to you if they caught you with that wood. And you also needed you needed a license just to cut your own wood down. And then these guys would come by and make these marks, like a broad arrow mark on the tree, and reserve it for the king. So even if you did cut it down, it was reserved for the king. And if they caught you with the reserved wood, using it for some other case, they would confiscate the wood. You would be forced to pay back the cost of the wood, and if you couldn't, it would be sold at auction, and maybe some other things might happen to you too. It was not a pleasant time to be a colonist, at least to be in the lumber industry anyway. So before the settlers could clear land or build cabins, barns, meeting houses, the king's sanctions, the king's sanction, which is that broad arrow mark, that white broad arrow mark, was required on pine trees reserved for the Royal Navy. Contraband white pine already sawed into log could be seized and a large settlement required. If not paid, authorities then sold them off for auction, like I said. 2 years after the Boston Massacre that killed 5 colonists, in 1772, a guy from New Hampshire, Ebenezer Mudgett was his name, finds himself at the very center of the conflict between the British Empire and the colony. In the winter of 1771 through 1772, a deputy surveyor of the King's Woods, you believe that crap? But the King's Woods found and marked for seizure 270 mast-worthy logs at Clements Mill, an oil mill now called Riverdale. That's why I'm standing right here. This is an intersection to Riverdale. All right, it doesn't look like much, but Clements Mill was here at one time, and this is where the king's deputies and the governor seized 270 logs, and this is kind of what started it all. He fined the log cutters from Ware, not Ware, but Ware, as in W-E-A-R-E, the town of Ware, New Hampshire. And those from nearby towns where illegal logs were also found. Men from other towns paid the fines, okay? So they did what the king told them to do, but those from Ware refused. Consequently, the Ware men were labeled notorious offenders. And so we're on to our next location. See you then.
You're watching the Common Constitutionalist video podcast.
Yeah, baby! Yeah. So as I said before the break, in the winter of 1771 through 1772, a deputy surveyor of the King's Woods found and marked for seizure 270 worthy mast logs at Clements Mill, our last location, known as Riverdale today. And most of the fined log cutters paid their fines and they got out of trouble, but the upstarts in Ware, New Hampshire didn't, and they were considered notorious offenders. And so the county sheriff, Benjamin Whiting, Esquire, of Hollis, New Hampshire, and his deputy John Quigley, Esquire, of Francistown, New Hampshire, were dispatched with delivering warrants and making arrests in the King's name. On April 13th, 1772, the sheriff and his deputy galloped into Ware, New Hampshire, that is, not Ware, but Ware, New Hampshire, and found major offender Ebenezer Mudgett, who promised to pay his fine the next day. The officials then retired to nearby Quimby's Inn for an overnight stay. The reason why we're standing here, that's Mast Road again, is this is the old site of Quimby's Inn. It ain't Quimby's Inn anymore, but I'll show you the commemorative plaque to show Quimby's Inn. Site of the Pine Tree Riot and kickoff of the Revolution in New Hampshire, baby. So there you go. That's, I gotta tell, like I said, the one cool thing about living in New England, if you're a Revolutionary War buff, there ain't no dearth of stuff to see, that's for sure. On the side of this road, people drive by this, thousands of people drive by every day, every week, and they don't notice that stone right there. That virtually, because of the Pine Tree Riot that I'm going to cover here in a minute, what they called the Pine Tree Riot, that was the first, as far as I know, the first armed insurrection of the colonists against the British Crown, and it predated, it post-dated the Boston Massacre, which wasn't a riot, because the colonists were just shot and killed, and they didn't necessarily riot. But it predated by almost 2 years, like I said, the Boston Tea Party and the Pine Tree Riots, what kicked it all off. Almost like taxation without representation. And this is the site of the Quimby's Inn where it all happened. Pretty cool, if I must say myself. So anyway, they found Mudgett. Mudgett agreed, okay, fine, I'll pay my fine. And they decided, okay, this is going to be a nice, easy assignment, Mr. Whiting and his deputy Quigley. And so they retired to the Quimby Inn, right here, overnight. This is just like, this is so awesome. I mean, 200 and some odd years ago, these guys, Mudgett could have been standing right where I'm standing right now. It's unbelievable when you think about it. It is so cool. It doesn't look too cool right now, but it's cool. So anyway, news that they had come, the two esquires, the two agents that were serving warrants to Ebenezer Mudgett, the major offender, news traveled fast that Mudgett was going to basically be arrested and caused to pay a fine and whatnot, and a plan was hatched. That following morning, early in the morning, more than 20 men with blackened faces and switches in hand rushed into Whiting's room. This is County Sheriff Benjamin Whiting, Esquire. You know what? I'm going to cut right here. I'm going to get off the road a little bit, as there's nothing to see here, so to speak. And at least that way I can speak without all the background noise a little bit. So I'll be right back. Alright, maybe that's a little bit better. Not great, but it's a little better. I'm on somebody's property, private property, so you know, I guess I'm like the Crown, you know, where I can go and do what I want. And let's see if there's any white pine trees that I can broad mark for my use in my ship's mast. But at any rate, I digress. So news that they had come for Mudgett flew through the town, and a plan was hatched. The following morning, more than 20 men with blackened faces and switches in hand rushed into Whiting's room right here at the Quimby Inn. I'm still stunned. This is so cool. They were led by Mudgett. The events were recounted. Quote, Whiting seized his pistols and would have shot some of them, but they caught him, took away his small guns, held him by his arms and legs up from the floor. His face down, 2 men on each side, and with their rods beat him to their heart's content. They crossed out the account against them of all logs cut, drawn, and forfeited on his bare back. They made him wish he had never heard of pine trees fit for masting for the Royal Navy. Whiting said, they almost killed me, unquote. As for Deputy Quigley, he got about the same treatment. The Ware men wrested the floorboards from the room above his and proceeded to beat him with long poles, with quote, jeers, jokes, and shouts ringing in their ears, unquote. The sheriff and his deputy were placed back on horses, and they rode out of town back toward Goffstown and Mast Road. There you go. The Ware men were ultimately arraigned and paid a light fine, but their rebellion against the Crown helped set the stage for the Revolution. I believe it was the first, again, like I said, I believe it was the first armed uprising against the Crown, and this was almost 2 years prior to the Boston Tea Party, and this exact site is where it happened. This is where Mudgett was. This is where the riot took place, the beatings took place, and this is history, brother, and I'm living it right now. This stone wall right here, see this stone wall? This could have been Revolutionary era. I don't know. I'm not certain. But all I know is that this is American history, and I'm living it. So thanks for joining me today. I hope you had as much fun as I did reliving the Pine Tree Riot in Ware, New Hampshire. Not Ware, New Hampshire. Ware, New Hampshire. And this was just flat cool. I may do some more of these location shoots if I can find something that's really interesting. But this is really cool, and this has been the Common Constitutionalist. Y'all have a blessed balance of the weekend, and we'll talk at you next week. See ya.